"Sir, stop right there," a voice called out, sharp and authoritative. Michael stopped, turning slowly to face the officer stepping out of the cruiser. The man was young, maybe late 20s, with a buzz cut and a stance that screamed overconfidence. His name tag read, Officer Daniels. A second officer, older, heavier, with a bored expression, leaned against the car, watching. "Can I help you, officer?" Michael asked, his voice steady, almost soft. He kept his hands loose at his sides, palms open. Daniels squinted at him, one hand resting on his holster. "You match the description of a suspect we're looking for, robbery down on Edgewood. Mind telling me where you're headed?" Michael's jaw tightened, but his expression didn't shift. "Just taking a walk. I work nearby." "Work, huh?" Daniel's tone dripped with skepticism. He stepped closer, eyeing Michael's clothes. "Where exactly?" "Over on 10th Street. Film set, Michael kept his answers short, factual. He knew the script for these encounters. Say little, stay calm, survive. Daniel smirked, glancing at his partner who shrugged. "Film set. You a grip or something?" "Look, we need to see some ID." Michael reached for his wallet, moving slowly, deliberately. He handed over his driver's license. Daniel studied it like it was a puzzle he didn't trust. Michael Carter. That name supposed to mean something? He handed the ID to his partner, who barely glanced at it before tossing it back. "It's just my name," Michael said evenly. A small crowd had started to gather across the street. Shoppers, a delivery guy, a woman pushing a stroller. Their eyes darted between Michael and the officers, some curious, some wary. Michael felt the weight of their gazes, but kept his focus on Daniels. "Mind if we pat you down?" Daniels asked, though it wasn't a question. Michael nodded, raising his arms slightly. The pat-down was quick, perfunctory, but it carried the familiar sting of humiliation. Daniel's hands lingered a moment too long, as if asserting dominance. "He's clean," Daniels said to his partner, who nodded, still looking bored. "All right, Mr. Carter, you're coming with us to the station, just to clear things up." Michael's heart sank, but he didn't argue. "Am I under arrest?" "Not yet," Daniels said, his tone clipped, "but you're detained until we sort this out. You match the description, black male, medium build, hoodie. Let's go." Michael's mind raced, but his face remained a mask of calm. He knew better than to escalate. He'd seen what happened when people pushed back too hard, too fast. Instead, he nodded and followed Daniels to the cruiser. The older officer, whose name tag read Officer Hayes, opened the back door. As Michael slid into the seat, he caught the eye of the woman with the stroller. She looked away quickly, but not before he saw a flicker of sympathy in her expression. The ride to the precinct was silent except for the crackle of the radio and Daniel's occasional muttering to Hayes about another one off the street. Michael stared out the window, watching Atlanta blur past. Gas stations, billboards, a mural of John Lewis on a brick wall. He thought about his film, about the scene they'd shot that morning, where a character confronts a corrupt official with nothing but words and truth. Irony, he thought bitterly. At the precinct, a squat brick building on Pryor Street, Michael was led inside. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the air smelled of stale coffee and disinfectant. Daniels pointed to a bench in the holding area. "Sit there, we'll get to you." Michael sat, his posture straight, his hands resting on his knees. The room was a mix of chaos and boredom, officers shuffling papers, a phone ringing unanswered, a man in handcuffs muttering to himself in the corner. Michael's eyes scanned the space, cataloguing details. A young officer, a black woman with a tight bun, glanced at him from behind a desk. Her name tag read Officer Jackson. She frowned slightly, as if trying to place him, then went back to her paperwork. Minutes dragged into an hour. Michael's phone, still in his pocket, buzzed once, a text from his assistant director, probably wondering where he was. He didn't reach for it. Instead, he focused on breathing, on staying grounded. He'd been underestimated before, dismissed, stereotyped. But he'd also learned how to turn that against people, how to let their assumptions become their undoing. Daniels reappeared, holding a clipboard. "All right, Carter, let's talk. You still claiming you were just taking a walk?" His tone was mocking, and he leaned against the wall, arms crossed. You know how many guys say that? We got a robbery, and you fit the bill, so what's your real story? Michael met his gaze, unflinching. I told you, I'm a director. I was on a break from a shoot. You can call my producer if you need to verify. Daniels snorted. A director? Like movies? Come on, man. You expect me to believe that? It's the truth, Michael said simply. He could feel the anger simmering beneath his calm, but he pushed it down. Anger wouldn't help here. Strategy would. Hayes, who'd been lingering nearby, chimed in. He doesn't look like no director. You ever see a director dressed like that? He chuckled, shaking his head. Michael didn't respond. He let their words hang in the air, let their assumptions build a case against themselves. Officer Jackson, still at her desk, looked up again, her frown deepening. She tilted her head, studying Michael's face. Then her eyes widened slightly, and she pulled out her phone, typing quickly. All right, let's run your prints, Daniels said, motioning for Michael to stand. If you're clean, maybe you walk. If not. He trailed off, smirking. As Michael stood, Officer Jackson approached, her phone in hand. Hold on, Daniels, she said, her voice firm but cautious. Can I talk to you for a second? Daniels rolled his eyes but followed her to the corner. Michael couldn't hear their conversation, but he saw Jackson show Daniels something on her phone. Daniels' smirk faded, replaced by a look of confusion, then irritation. He glanced back at Michael, his jaw tight. What's this about? Daniels muttered, loud enough for Michael to hear. Jackson's voice was low, insistent. Just look at it. You sure you got the right guy? Michael sat back down, his expression unchanged. He knew what was coming. He'd seen it before, the moment when people realized they'd misjudged him, when their world tilted just enough to make them question themselves. He didn't gloat, he didn't need to. The truth was enough. The precinct's fluorescent lights flickered, casting a sterile glow over the holding area. Michael Carter sat on the bench, his posture still composed, his hands resting calmly on his knees. The air was thick with tension, the kind that settles in when assumptions start to unravel. Officer Daniels stood in the corner with Officer Jackson, his face a mix of irritation and disbelief as she showed him her phone. Michael couldn't hear their hushed exchange, but he caught the shift in Daniels' body language, shoulders stiffening, eyes darting back to him. Jackson's voice rose just enough for Michael to catch fragments. Sundance. Redemption Road. Look at the photo, Daniels. She held her phone closer, and Daniels' scowl deepened. He muttered something Michael couldn't make out, then strode back toward him, clipboard still in hand. All right, Carter, Daniels said, his tone less certain now. You're telling me you're some big-shot director. Prove it. Michael's eyes met Daniels', steady and unyielding. I don't have to prove anything to you, he said quietly. You detained me based on a description that could fit half the men in Atlanta. I've cooperated. I've given you my ID. If you've got questions, call my producer. Her name's Lisa Grant. Her number's in my phone. Daniels hesitated, caught off guard by Michael's calm defiance. The room seemed to shrink around them, the other officers and detainees glancing over, sensing the shift. Officer Hayes, still leaning against a desk, chuckled nervously. Come on, man, don't make this harder than it needs to be. Michael didn't break eye contact with Daniels. I'm not making it hard, you are. Jackson stepped forward, her expression a mix of caution and resolve. I looked you up, Mr. Carter, she said, holding up her phone. The screen showed a headshot from a Variety article, Michael's face unmistakable. You're directing Redemption Road, nominated for an NAACP Image Award last year. That you, right? Michael nodded once, his face still neutral. That's me. Daniel's jaw tightened, but he didn't back down. Doesn't change the fact that you match the suspect's description. We're doing our job. Your job. Michael's voice was low, deliberate. Your job is to protect and serve, not to stop every black man in a hoodie and call it police work. You didn't ask me where I was at the time of the robbery. You didn't check my alibi. You saw me, made a snap judgment, and here we are. The words landed like a quiet thunderclap. The room stilled. A clerk at a nearby desk stopped typing. The man in handcuffs in the corner looked up, his muttering silenced. Even Hayes shifted uncomfortably, his smirk gone. Daniels opened his mouth to respond, but Jackson cut him off. He's right, Daniels. We didn't follow protocol. No timeline, no witness ID, nothing. We need to verify his story before this goes any further. Daniels glared at her, then at Michael. Fine, give me the producer's number. Michael recited Lisa's number from memory, his voice steady. Daniels scribbled it down and stalked off to make the call, his boots echoing on the linoleum. Jackson lingered, her expression apologetic. I'm sorry about this, Mr. Carter, she said softly. I recognized you from the article. My sister's a big fan of your work. Michael gave her a small nod, his first hint of warmth. Appreciate that. The weight stretched on, heavy with unspoken tension. Michael's thoughts drifted to his film, to the scenes he'd written about justice, about people fighting systems that dismissed them. He'd poured his own experiences into those scripts, moments like this one where the world saw only his skin and his clothes, not the man beneath. But he'd learned long ago that anger alone didn't change minds. Strategy did. Patience did. Daniels returned 10 minutes later, his face a mask of barely contained frustration. Your producer checks out, he said, his voice clipped. Says you were on set all morning. You're free to go. Michael stood slowly, brushing off his hoodie. That's it? Daniels didn't answer, just handed him his ID. Hayes avoided his gaze, suddenly engrossed in a stack of papers. But Michael wasn't done. He turned to Jackson, who was watching him closely. You got a supervisor around? She hesitated, then nodded. Lieutenant Brooks is in her office. I'd like to speak with her, Michael said. His tone was calm, but there was steel beneath it. Lieutenant Brooks was a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Her office was small, cluttered with files and a photo of her kids on the desk. Michael sat across from her, Daniels and Jackson standing awkwardly near the door. Brooks listened as Michael recounted the stop, his voice measured but firm, laying out every detail, the vague suspect description, the lack of questions about his whereabouts, the pat-down, the hour on the bench. Brooks' frown deepened as he spoke. When he finished, she turned to Daniels. You detained him based on what? A hoodie and his race. Daniels shifted, defensive. He matched the description, ma'am. Black male, medium build, 30s to 40s. We were following procedure. Procedure, Michael interjected, his voice still calm but cutting. You didn't ask for my alibi. You didn't call dispatch to confirm the suspect's details. You saw me walking and decided I was guilty. That's not procedure. That's bias. Brooks' eyes narrowed, but she didn't interrupt. Michael reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card, sliding it across the desk. I'm Michael Carter. I direct films. My current project's shooting 3 blocks from where your officers stopped me. I've got a crew of 50 people who can vouch for my whereabouts. But you wouldn't know that because your officers didn't bother to ask. Brooks picked up the card, her expression shifting as she read it. Carter Films, LLC, she said, glancing up. You're the Michael Carter. Yes, ma'am, he said simply. But that shouldn't matter. I could be a janitor, a teacher, or unemployed, and I'd still deserve better than what happened today. The room fell silent. Daniel's face flushed, and Hayes, who'd slipped into the office, looked at the floor. Jackson's eyes held a mix of respect and regret. Brooks leaned back in her chair, exhaling. You're right. This was a failure on our part. Michael didn't leave the precinct right away. He filed a formal complaint detailing the incident in writing. Brooks assured him it would be investigated, but Michael knew better than to trust promises alone. He called his lawyer, a sharp civil rights attorney named Carla Evans, and by the next morning they were drafting a lawsuit, not just against Daniels and Hayes, but against the department for systemic failures in training and oversight. The story broke in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution a week later. Award-winning director detained without cause. The article quoted Michael's complaint and included a statement from Brooks, who promised a review of department protocols. Social media erupted, with hashtags like #Justice for Michael trending on X. A local activist group organized a rally outside the precinct, demanding accountability. Daniels and Hayes were suspended pending investigation, but Michael's focus wasn't on them. At a community meeting the following month, he stood before a packed room at the Auburn Avenue Research Library. The crowd was diverse: students, activists, even a few officers, including Jackson, who sat in the back, listening intently. "I'm not here to vilify anyone," Michael said, his voice steady, resonant. "I'm here to talk about what happens when we let assumptions override facts." I was stopped because I fit a description that could have been anyone. That's not justice, that's a system that needs fixing. He paused, scanning the room. I could have yelled, fought back, made a scene. But that's not who I am. And it's not what changes things. What changes things is holding people accountable, not with anger, but with truth. I'm suing the department not for me, but for the next person who gets stopped for walking down the street. The room erupted in applause, but Michael's eyes caught Daniel's, who'd slipped in at the last minute, standing by the door. The officer's face was pale, his eyes red. When Michael finished, Daniels approached, his voice low. I didn't know who you were. I messed up. I'm sorry." Michael looked at him, his expression unreadable. "It's not about who I am. It's about what you did. Do better." Daniels nodded, swallowing hard, and walked away. Michael didn't watch him go. He turned back to the crowd, where a young woman in the front row raised her hand. "Mr. Carter, what can we do?" "Speak up," he said. "Call out bias when you see it. Record it. Report it. And don't let anyone tell you it's not worth fighting for. Change starts with us." The room buzzed with energy, with hope. Michael stepped off the stage, his Braves cap back on, and slipped out into the Atlanta night. The fight wasn't over, but it had begun. Share this story. Talk about bias where you see it. In your workplace, your community, your life. Change doesn't happen in silence. It happens when we demand better, together.